The words that broke me came wrapped in the voice I once trusted most. "You're dead weight. Go live in a dumpster," my daughter-in-law hissed, and before I could catch my breath, her palm cracked across my cheek. I tasted metal, staggered, and thought, absurdly, of birthdays and school plays and the way this room used to sound when laughter filled it at 6 p.m., when my husband Robert was still alive. I pressed my hand to the heat blooming on my face and whispered, "Kaya, please." But Mercy had already left the house. She moved closer, eyes bright with something meaner than anger, and said, "You call burning potatoes helping?" The word helping hung between us like a dare. I wanted to tell her my hands shake now, that grief makes a person forget small things like timers and lights. I wanted to say I was trying. Instead, I looked past her to the doorway, hoping my son would step in and say, "Enough." Terrence arrived with his arms folded and an expression I didn't recognize. I thought, here's my boy, the one I carried for 9 months, who cried into my neck after every lost baseball game. "Mom," he said, and the way he said it was a closing door. "Kaya's right. You're making our lives difficult." I said, "Terrence, honey, you don't mean that," and he stared straight through me as if I were smoke. "I wish it had been you instead of Dad." The world went silent. Somewhere, a clock ticked. Too loud, too steady, as if measuring out the distance between who we were and what we had become. I reached for the couch to stay upright and saw, in the framed photos on the mantel, a life where I still belonged. A picnic by the lake, my husband's arm around my shoulders, my son grinning with a grass stain on his knee. "This is my home," I said, the words thin as thread. "My name is on the lease." Terrence gave a short, practiced laugh. "Actually, it's not. You signed everything over last month. Insurance forms, remember?" Memory hit like a cold wave. The afternoon at the dining table, the stack of papers he slid toward me, the pen he pressed into my hand, the promise it was just to protect assets. Kaya's voice turned syrupy. "We'll visit you. Maybe on holidays," she said, and the word holidays sounded like a joke told at my expense. I wanted to step out of my body and walk down the street to the life I'd had before. My small house, the front garden, Robert's toolbox under the sink, but I had sold it to help their mortgage, to be close, to be useful. I thought, how quietly a person can be erased while still standing in the middle of her own living room. "Please," I said, hating the way desperation makes a voice smaller. "I don't have anywhere else to go." Terrence's face didn't soften. "That's not our problem. We have our own family to think about." Something inside me tilted. Own family. As though the years I had spent watching their babies, cooking their dinners, handing over my Social Security checks each month were a favor they'd never asked for and therefore didn't have to honor. Kaya pointed a manicured finger and said, "We think it's time for one of those senior places." And I could see it. The fluorescent hallways, the careful warehousing of people whose names live only on charts. The front door opened at 7:30 p.m., heavy steps crossing the entry tile. I braced for the final humiliation, a stranger called to do what family wouldn't, to escort me out of the life I had paid for. But when the figure paused in the doorway, the room shifted around his silhouette like it recognized him before I did. Marcus, my grandson, Terrence's boy from his first marriage, stood in an expensive suit like he'd grown a spine of steel and learned how to use it. He didn't rush. He let his gaze take in the scene, my hand on my cheek. Kaya's mouth still curled, Terrence's arms locked across his chest as if restraining the truth. Marcus tucked his phone into his palm and said in a voice I'd never heard from him, "Well, isn't this interesting?" My heart, battered as it was, lifted once. If there was a lifeline in this house, it had just walked through the door. Marcus didn't raise his voice. He didn't have to. "What I'm seeing," he said, eyes moving from Kaya to Terrence to me, is my grandmother with a handprint on her face and a room full of people who should know better. Kaya tried to pivot, bright and brittle. Marcus, you don't understand. She's been forgetting things. She's unsafe. And he cut her off with a small surgical smile. Unsafe is a woman who gets slapped at 7:30 p.m. in her own living room. Unsafe is a forged signature. He lifted his phone, thumb flicking across the screen, slow as a metronome. Before you say the word misunderstanding, Dad, think carefully. Terrence bristled. My son has always hated being cornered and said, "This is family business." Marcus tilted his head. "Then consider me the audit." He came to me first, lowering his voice so it belonged only to us. "Are you hurt?" he asked, and the softness there almost undid me. I said, "I'm all right, because mothers say that even when we aren't." He nodded once and turned back, the softness gone like a coat shrugged off in summer. "Here's what's true," he said, and the room quieted in spite of itself. "For the past 2 years, you have deposited my grandmother's Social Security, $1,200 a month, and her pension, $800 a month, straight into your joint account. You also moved $50,000 from her life insurance payout into the same account within 1 week of Grandpa's funeral." Kaya's smile cracked. Terrence tried, "We were managing bills for the house," and Marcus didn't blink. "You were managing theft. Total, you've siphoned approximately $87,000 while telling anyone who would listen that she's confused and difficult." I felt the ground steady under me for the first time in months. The facts lined up hand in hand and made a bridge back to myself. "Marcus," I whispered, "how do you know this?" He glanced at me, warmth returning just enough to keep me from floating away. "Because I've been watching," he said, "documenting. I installed cameras with Grandma's permission when I said the neighborhood worried me. I pulled bank statements, I traced every transaction." Kaya's voice pitched higher. "You're just a dropout grasping at money you didn't earn." And he actually laughed, not cruelly, fatally. "I graduated summa cum laude 3 years ago. I started an investment firm 18 months back. We went public last quarter." He shrugged, like wealth was a coat he barely noticed wearing. "I didn't come for your money. I came for hers." The room felt smaller, as if the walls had leaned in to hear the rest. Marcus reached into his jacket and produced an envelope sealed with wax gone honey-thin with age. My name on the front in Robert's measured hand unraveled me. "Grandpa gave this to me the day before he died," Marcus said. "He told me to deliver it only if things got really bad." The wax broke with a sigh. I unfolded the letter and heard Robert's voice as clearly as if he stood in the doorway. "My dearest Leona, if you're reading this, protect yourself. There are truths I never told because I loved you more than I loved the comfort of honesty." My eyes skimmed, then stopped, then refused to move, and then moved anyway. Terrence is not my biological son. His father was a man named James Mitchell from your life before me. I raised him as mine because I chose you and I chose him. But my will reflects what I could not say out loud. I looked up and met Terrence's eyes. For a second, I saw a boy on a pitcher's mound, dirt on his cheek, waiting for my nod. Then the present rushed back, and he shook his head hard enough to chase the past away. "That's a lie," he said, voice splintering. Marcus set a second document on the coffee table with slow reverence, like a priest laying down a relic. "It's the updated will Grandpa filed weeks before he died. It supersedes the version you waved around after the funeral. The house, the savings, the investments, all left to Grandma. You, Dad, were left $10,000, enough for a fresh start. No more." Kaya whispered, "That can't be legal." And Marcus said, "It is, completely." The photos on the mantel seemed to tilt toward me. The room used my husband's signature like a lighthouse. All the humiliation I'd swallowed for 2 years rose and then settled into something heavy and hard. Weight I could finally stand on. Terrence's mouth worked around words that didn't come. Kaya stepped back like the floor might open. I smoothed the letter with my palm as if I could iron the years flat. "So," I said quietly, the syllable landing like a small stone on still water, breaking the surface. "What happens now?" Marcus met my eyes without blinking. "Now you choose." The choice felt like a door with my name on it, and for once the key was in my hand. I exhaled, tasting not metal but air. The silence that followed was so deep I could hear the ticking of the kitchen clock through the walls. Kaya broke first. "You can't just walk in here and play hero," she spat, voice trembling. "We've been taking care of her for 2 years, feeding her, housing her." Marcus cut her off. "You mean living off her? There's a difference." He crossed the room, calm and deliberate, and stopped in front of my son. "I used to look up to you, Dad. You were supposed to teach me what it meant to be a man, but all you've taught me is how cowardice hides behind excuses." Terrence's jaw clenched. "You think you understand? You've been gone, Marcus. You don't know what it's like to keep a family afloat when everything's falling apart." Marcus's voice softened, almost pitying. "You're right. I don't know what it's like to steal from my own mother while convincing myself it's noble." Kaya threw her hands up. "Enough! This is ridiculous. We're done with this charade." She turned to Terrence. "Let's go. Let her rot here with her fancy grandson." But Terrence didn't move. His eyes were fixed on me. "Mom," he said quietly, almost pleading, "you don't believe any of this, do you? You know I'd never hurt you." I opened my mouth to answer and realized the words that wanted to come out were all apologies. Habits of a lifetime, rehearsed in silence. I closed my mouth instead. Marcus reached into his pocket again, pulled out his phone, and said, "If you really want to know what I believe, let's listen." A few taps, and the living room filled with the sound of my own voice begging, "Please, I have nowhere else to go," followed by Kaya's slap, by Terrence's cruel wish that I had died instead of his father. My stomach turned, hearing it played back, raw and undeniable. Terrence's face went gray. Kaya lunged for the phone, shouting, "Delete that!" Marcus stepped aside easily. "This is evidence," he said. "Audio, video, financial, everything you've done is documented." Kaya's composure shattered. "You can't record us without permission," she screamed, but Marcus only raised an eyebrow. "Grandma gave me permission. She thought it was for security. Turns out it was." He pocketed the phone and turned to me, his voice gentle again. "You don't have to stay here another night. You can come with me. I already found you a place that's yours." The words washed over me like light after a long tunnel. I didn't realize I was crying until Marcus reached out and brushed a tear from my cheek. Terrence stood rooted in place, hollow-eyed, the way a man looks when the roof finally caves in. "You can't do this," he said. "You can't just take her." Marcus turned to him, steady as stone. "I'm not taking her. I'm giving her back what you stole, her dignity, her safety, her home." The knock at the door startled us all. Marcus walked to answer it, and when he returned, 2 uniformed officers followed behind him, a woman in a dark blazer at their side. "Mrs. Morrison?" she said, approaching me with professional calm. "I'm Detective Sarah Walsh from the County Elder Abuse Unit. We received a report earlier this evening regarding financial exploitation and physical assault." Kaya's face drained of color. "This is insane," she hissed. "You can't—" "Actually," the detective interrupted, "we can. We have evidence, witness statements, and recorded audio." She turned to me. "Ma'am, do you want to press charges?" For a moment, my heart stumbled. Even now, some old part of me wanted to say no, to protect the people who'd hurt me. But when I looked at Marcus, steady, unflinching, I remembered the slap, the words, the way I'd been erased piece by piece. "Yes," I said, my voice low but sure. "I do." Kaya screamed as the officers stepped forward, grabbing her wrists, reading rights that fell like hammer blows. Terrence didn't move until they reached for him. "Mom," he said, panic breaking through for the first time. "Please don't do this." I looked at him, really looked, and all I saw was the boy who'd once held my hand crossing the street, now grown into a man I barely recognized. "I didn't do this, Terrence," I said quietly. "You did." The handcuffs clicked shut. As they were led outside, Kaya shouting curses and Terrence staring at the floor, Marcus put an arm around me and said softly, "You're safe now, Grandma. I promise." For the first time in 2 years, I believed him. The door closed behind the officers, and the house fell still. I stood in the silence, feeling the echo of my husband's words in that letter, "Protect yourself," and whispered into the empty room, "I finally did." The next morning, sunlight spilled through the kitchen windows like a benediction. I sat at the table with a cup of coffee in my favorite mug, the one Kaya had hidden away because she said it was too nice for everyday use. Marcus had found it last night, washed it, and placed it in front of me as if returning something sacred. The house felt impossibly quiet. No Kaya clattering pans, no Terrence's heavy footsteps pacing above me, just birds outside, the hum of the refrigerator, the gentle rhythm of my own breathing. Peace felt strange, almost too big, like wearing clothes that hadn't fit in years. I watched Marcus at the counter typing on his laptop, his posture sharp and certain. "There'll be a rain this afternoon," he said without looking up. "The detectives said it's an open and shut case. You won't have to testify until the trial." I nodded, the words registering slowly. "I keep thinking I'll wake up and find it was just a dream," I murmured. Marcus smiled faintly. "You're awake, Grandma, and they're finally going to answer for what they did." I wanted to tell him that justice and healing weren't the same thing, that one doesn't erase the scars of the other. But instead, I said, "Thank you, Marcus, for saving me." He closed the laptop, leaned his elbows on the table, and said, "You saved yourself. I just made sure the world noticed." The following weeks blurred together in paperwork and police visits, my days filled with small recoveries, reclaiming forgotten things, the cardigan I'd stopped wearing because Kaya said it made me look frumpy, the framed photo of Robert I found tucked behind a stack of boxes, the small ceramic bird Mrs. Peterson had once given me, now perched by the window again. Each object felt like a breath of the life I'd been made to forget. And with each breath, I felt my spine straighten a little more. Then one afternoon, 3 weeks later, the doorbell rang. Through the glass, I saw a man standing on the porch, shoulders slumped, suit rumpled. My heart stuttered. Terrence. For a moment, instinct overrode reason. I wanted to open the door and say his name softly, the way I did when he scraped his knees as a child. But I hesitated, keeping the chain in place as I cracked the door. "Mom," he said, his voice hoarse, "please, can we talk?" "Your lawyer told you not to contact me," I replied, keeping my tone calm. He nodded, eyes wet. "I know, but I had to see you. Kaya left me. She took the kids. Everything's gone." His words spilled like water from a broken pipe. I never meant for it to go this far. I studied his face. The deep lines, the sleepless eyes, the weight of his choices pulling at every feature. "You meant every word the night you said you wished I'd died," I said quietly. "You chose to believe I was a burden instead of remembering I was your mother." "I was angry," he whispered. "I was drowning. We were about to lose the house. Kaya kept pushing me. And you let her," I interrupted, the words surprising even me with their steadiness. "You didn't just let her, you joined her." He bowed his head, silent. Then, with a voice barely audible, "Mom, I'm begging you. Drop the charges, I'll pay you back. I swear I will." I shook my head slowly. "With what, Terrence? You told me yourself you've lost everything." His lips trembled. "Please, prison will destroy me. You're my mother." For a heartbeat, guilt tried to claw its way in, whispering that mercy was the only way forward. But then I remembered the nights I'd gone to bed hungry so they could eat takeout, the mornings I'd found my medication bottles half empty, the echo of my own voice on Marcus's recording begging to stay. "You destroyed yourself," I said softly. "I just survived it." Marcus's car pulled into the driveway at that moment. He stepped out, saw Terrence, and his expression hardened. "You're violating your bail conditions," he said. "Leave now or I call Detective Walsh." Terrence turned to him, desperate. "Marcus, you can't mean that. I'm still your father." Marcus's voice was quiet, final. "You were supposed to be, but you forgot how." I stood behind the door, listening to the sound of Terrence's car fade down the street, and realized my hands were steady, truly steady, for the first time in years. I turned to Marcus and said, "He's lost." Marcus shook his head gently. "Maybe he's just finally seeing what he lost." I nodded, feeling tears burn behind my eyes but refusing to let them fall, because for once, they weren't tears of weakness. They were the kind that come when a storm has finally passed and you're still standing. "Come inside," I said. "We have coffee to finish." The courthouse loomed larger than I remembered, its marble columns cold and unforgiving against the morning light. As Marcus helped me up the steps, I thought about how strange justice feels, heavy in the hands of those who have carried enough already. Inside, the air smelled faintly of paper and old wood polish, the kind of place where truth has to fight to be heard. For 3 days, I sat through the trial, listening as lawyers dissected my life, my motherhood, my mistakes. They spoke of financial exploitation and elder abuse like clinical conditions, not the slow, daily erasure of a person's worth. Terrence sat at the defendant's table, eyes hollow, Kaya beside him, her once perfect posture now slumped in defeat. I tried not to look at them, but sometimes I couldn't help it. When Terrence turned his head just so, I could still see the boy who used to hand me dandelions and say, "For you, Mom." It hurt, but I let the pain sit beside me, quiet and steady instead of letting it consume me. When the prosecutor played the recording, Kaya's slap, Terrence's voice wishing me dead, the jury flinched. I didn't cry. I just watched their faces as they realized what cruelty sounds like when stripped of excuses. Marcus sat beside me, his hand folded over mine, anchoring me every time my resolve trembled. On the last morning, while we waited for the verdict, a woman approached me in the hallway. She was around my age, silver hair neatly pinned, eyes kind but sad. "Mrs. Morrison? I'm Janet Peterson," she said softly. "My mother was your neighbor." My breath caught. "Mrs. Peterson, she was my friend." Janet nodded. "She passed away last winter, but before she did, she asked me to give you something if I ever saw you." From her bag, she pulled a small package wrapped in faded tissue paper. "She wanted you to know she never believed what your son said about you. She said real friends don't abandon each other." My throat closed as I unwrapped the gift, a small blue ceramic bird painted with tiny white flowers. Mrs. Peterson's bird. I remembered admiring it over tea years ago, before isolation replaced laughter. I held it carefully, feeling the weight of friendship that had outlived deceit. "Thank you," I whispered. Tell her I remember too." When the jury returned, the room fell silent. The foreman stood, papers trembling slightly in his hand. On the charge of financial exploitation of a vulnerable adult, he read, we find the defendants guilty. Kaya gasped. Terrence closed his eyes. On the charge of elder abuse, the foreman continued, we find the defendants guilty. My breath came slow, deliberate. I didn't celebrate. I just let the truth settle, finally heavier than the lies that had lived here for so long. As the judge set sentencing for the following week, Terrence turned in his chair and looked at me. There was no anger now, no arrogance, only the quiet ruin of a man who had built his life on sand. Afterward, his lawyer approached me. Mrs. Morrison, he said gently, my client hopes you might consider writing a letter to the judge asking for leniency. I looked through the glass window at Terrence, handcuffed, waiting to be escorted out. For a moment, I remembered tucking him into bed, reading stories about knights and forgiveness. Then I thought of the woman in those recordings, begging not to be thrown away like trash. I'll think about it, I said, though in my heart, I already knew. A week later, in that same courtroom, the judge read the sentence, 3 years in prison for Terrence, with the possibility of parole after 18 months if he completed a financial responsibility program and paid full restitution, 2 years probation for Kaya, plus community service and repayment of her share. When they asked if he wished to speak before being taken away, Terrence turned to me. Mom, he said quietly, I don't deserve your forgiveness, but I want you to know I remember. I remember you working nights to buy me school shoes. I remember you reading to me even when you were too tired to keep your eyes open. Somewhere along the way, I forgot who you were. I'm sorry. I met his gaze and felt years of weight shifting inside me. I forgive you, I said, my voice soft but steady. But I won't forget, and I won't ever let anyone make me feel worthless again. He nodded, tears filling his eyes as the bailiff led him away. That night, the house was quiet again, but not lonely. Marcus sat with me on the back porch, the sky painted in soft pinks and golds. The garden Robert and I had planted years ago was blooming again, roses bright as embers in the fading light. He wrote me a letter, Marcus said, handing me an envelope with a prison stamp. He says he's teaching other inmates to read, trying to change. I smiled faintly. Then maybe there's hope. Marcus looked at me. I told him you're happy, that you're free. I watched the sunset melt into twilight and whispered, yes, I am free. Free from fear, from shame, from the kind of love that comes with a leash. Free to start again, even at 64. As the stars appeared, the ceramic bird on the windowsill caught the fading light, its blue wings glowing like a promise. Mrs. Peterson had been right. Real friends never abandon you, and real family, I'd learned, isn't always the one you're born into. It's the people who show up when everyone else walks away. Sometimes it's a grandson with the courage to fight for you. Sometimes it's the neighbor who never stopped believing. And sometimes it's you choosing, finally, to stand up for yourself and live again. If this story moved you, please like, share, and subscribe to hear more real stories that remind us what strength looks like in ordinary lives. Tell me in the comments, what would you have done if you were in my place?